Corinthians chapter 12. Paul is writing, and he's saying, it is expedient for me, doubtless, to glory. I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. I knew a man in Christ beyond 14 years ago, whether in the body I cannot tell, or whether out of the body I cannot tell. God knoweth. Such a one caught up to the third heaven. And I knew such a man, whether in the body or out of the body, I cannot tell, God knoweth, how that he was caught up into paradise and heard unspeakable words, which is not lawful for a man to utter. Of such a one will I glory, yet of myself I will not glory, but in mine infirmities. For though I would desire to glory, I shall not be a fool, for I will say the truth. But now I forbear, lest any man should think of me above that which he seeth me to be, or that he heareth of me. And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he saith unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Paul is saying, Most gladly therefore will I rather glory in mine infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, and in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then am I strong. Father, add thy blessing to this thy precious word, in Christ's name. Amen. I have a desire to be a helpful servant of the Lord. And the other day I came across something in the book of Job that I like real well, that I shall use to preface my remarks with. Eliphaz is speaking to Job, and he's summing up some of the good virtues that Job has before he lowers the boom on him and lets him have it. He said, if we essay to commune with thee, chapter 4, verse 2, wilt thou be grieved? But who can withhold himself from speaking? These fellows did pretty good. They kept their mouths shut for a week before they lowered the boom, and that's longer than most of us can keep our mouths shut, isn't it? He said, Behold, thou hast instructed many, thou hast strengthened the weak hand, and thy words have upholden him that was fallen, and thou hast strengthened the feeble knees. And Moffat translates it this way, Your words have kept men on their feet. I have a desire to help people stay on their feet. And I feel that part of the ministry of every camp, somewhere along the line, some kind of truth should be given to help people stand on their feet. It's as important to, you've heard me say it many times, it's as important to keep a saint as it is to make a saint. And so this morning I'd like to talk to you about Paul's problem, the ugly gift. There was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me. So I'd like to talk about the ugly gift that God gave, or transfigured by the thorn. Paul makes it very clear here that he began to realize that God sent this thorn in his flesh for an express purpose. He said, lest I be exalted above measure. I've had these revelations. I've been carried up into heaven. I've been in paradise. I've been lifted. I didn't know whether I was in the body or whether I was out of the body, but oh, what glorious revelations I had. What a time of lifting. What a time of elevation. What a time of spiritual illumination. I saw things unutterable. I saw things that I can't express. I saw things I can't communicate. They're beyond my language. They're beyond my divine permission. I can't tell you about them. I was certainly lifted up into paradise, lifted up into heaven. I was in the heavenly places, and when I came back, I couldn't tell anybody what I saw. No one would understand it or comprehend it if I could have received divine permission to tell it. But he said, lest I be exalted above measure. Since there was a grave danger of spiritual pride coming out of this elevation, coming out of this revelation, since I was standing in jeopardy, God gave me something to bring me down to earth with a jolt. I was brought back to earth as truly as I was raised to heaven. I was brought into this world with its heartache and its sobs and its sorrows as truly as I was lifted into the heavenly world with its angelic choirs and its beatific visions. There's a great danger in all of us after having been elevated and lifted that we forget the great dangers that we are exposed to. And great elevation and great light and great privileges and great blessings bring likewise great dangers. And we've been lifted. We've been elevated. You've been saved in this camp. You've been sanctified in this camp. One of my dear brothers from the Pilgrim Church last night came to me and said, "Oh, Brother Schmul, I want to testify to you. I'm really sanctified, holy." And his face was radiant. His face shone, and my heart was thrilled. What a glorious elevation. But, we all will have to come back to earth in a few days, and you may come down with a jolt. You may come down with rather a crashing experience. The more exalting the experience, the longer our years of service to Christ, the more subtle the danger of losing our way through spiritual pride, through smugness and self-sufficiency. I feel this is a real danger in all of us. I sort of feel that there's a real danger of the holiness crowd. Maybe this is a danger that is associated with the exalted experiences we have. There's a smugness at times about us. There's a spiritual pride that at times is very evident. I went through last summer, as I did many other summers, and listened to the preaching. And I always like to listen to the preachers. I appreciate the preaching of God's Word. But sometimes I feel that maybe we ministers unconsciously leave the impression in the minds of the people that we've arrived, that the preacher is there, that he is the end product. This is the finished item you're looking at. Here I am, resplendent in all of my saved and sanctified glory, plus all these years of experience and knowledge and information. Many times people sort of feel that the preacher's infallible because the minister has managed to project a popish attitude in the minds of the people, when actually we are called from among men to minister to men. And we should be sympathetic with the weaknesses and the failures and the frailties of mankind. And apparently the Apostle Paul said, I was elevated, I was lifted, but God brought a compensating item into my life. And he talks about the gift of the thorn. There was given to me a thorn. Now the translators tell us that this word thorn is more than just a little kind of a deal you'd pick off from a rose bush, or even more than the kind you'd pick off of some of the prickly shrubbery around this beautiful southern clime, or more than some of the thorn apple bushes you'd find in our northland. This was a very long, rugged, stake-like instrument that Paul has reference to. Matter of fact, the boys that were in Africa and the Middle East tell me that often the tires on their Jeeps and their heavy equipment were punctured by these stake-like thorns that would go right through 6 8-ply tires. Paul said there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, a stake, a cruel, rugged tool that was put deep into my consciousness, a thing of which I was constantly and continually aware. It was driven in there with a purpose, lest I be exalted above measure. This thing was given to me. Francis Asbury, that great prophet of the long road, confided to his diary near the end of his days. He wrote in that diary using his saddlebag for a desk. He says, "Dear Lord, if thou dost see that thy servant," think of it now, here's the eminent Asbury, a holy man, lived for God, wore out for God, wore out scores of horses, beat himself across the wilderness, writing to the Lord in his diary, "Dear Lord, if thou dost see that thy servant would stray from the way and miss the city in tender pity, send a thorn deep into my side and drive me to thy Christ and thy Calvary." I thought, oh, if Asbury needed to pray that prayer when the wilderness was rugged and when the land was tough and when the going was difficult and when Methodism was ablaze, how much more I need to pray that kind of a prayer in the 20th century when luxury and ease and comforts and delights beckon on every hand. But sir, unless you find that prayer in your heart, I question whether you'll make the city of the everlasting God. This prayer would be a fitting prayer for every last one of us. Lord, if you see that some of the ease and some of the comforts and some of the delight or some of the exalted experiences or friendships or relations I have would in any wise pull me from thee in tender pity, drive a thorn deep into my side and drive me to thy Christ and to thy Calvary. This gift, we're all interested in gifts. We all like to receive gifts. Paul said there was given to me a gift. Aye, we like to take the ribbons off and tear off the wrappings, and it's always good. Why, this was a good gift. He didn't think it was for 14 years. This was a good gift. This was the ideal gift. It came from God, who never makes a mistake. It came from God, who never makes an error of any kind. It came from the all-wise God. Every good and every perfect gift cometh down. Do we believe that? Do we really believe that every good and every perfect gift cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variableness nor shadow of turning? Do we really believe this? I think we do. We say we do, but how about it when it arrives? How about it when it comes? Paul said there was given to me a thorn, a stake. This gift that Paul received was given and prompted by a father's loving care. God sent it because Paul needed it. He needed it even though he didn't think he needed it. This is exactly what he needed, for this gift was a personal gift. It was ideally and perfectly suited to the apostle's mental and emotional and spiritual and physical needs. It was as suitable for him as your set of false teeth is suitable for you and nobody else. It was as suitable as the shoes on your feet or the clothes on your back. It was tailor-made for his intellect, tailor-made for his emotions, tailor-made for his disposition, tailor-made for his day, tailor-made for his time. It was a gift. He didn't have to buy it. He didn't have to purchase it. He didn't have to beg God for it. God gave it to him. God gave him this as surely as he gave him the revelation. The revelation, oh, how quickly he cuts the ribbons and opens the package, how delightful. Woo, glory, things I can't tell you about, boys. Wonderful. Oh, if I could just convey to your poor dull minds the things I have seen and the things I have felt, why it's never entered into the heart of a man. The things that God, and how high Paul could soar. But he comes down to earth here with a bang, and God has given him a gift. It was a painful gift. It was a buffeting thing. It was a bewildering thing. It was a baffling thing. People say, well, what was it? Well, Charlie Shedd has come out with a new book, and he says, well, he doesn't try to be very scholarly about it. He says, I think maybe Paul's thorn in the flesh was that he was a fat Jew, and he was overweight, and he waddled around, and his problem was too much fat. Well, I don't really believe that this is a proper hermeneutics or exegesis or whatever those big words the scholars use. But anyhow, this is Charlie Shedd's idea. He says, because after all, doesn't Paul say, I die daily? And he says, everybody that tries to lose weight, he says they die 1,000 deaths every time they see a cream pie or a chocolate cake. He said they just die all over again while they watch their skinny friends eat it up. Well, I'm not sure about that. I believe it was G.D. Watson who said that Paul's thorn in the flesh was his appearance. Over here in Corinthians, Paul tells them, he said, I was before you in fear and with trembling, and he said, they say his bodily presence is weak, and his speech is downright contemptible. His letters are weighty, but he didn't make a very good public appearance, and so he was either real fat or real skinny. I'm not sure which it is any longer. But Watson's theory was that when stoned at Lystra, he was so bruised, he was so mangled, he was so disfigured that by the time he shook the rock pile off and walked out of there, to the surprise of his friends and the chagrin of his enemies, that he was a beaten, malformed man who had an ugly, repulsive appearance. Some claim that this perhaps was Paul's thorn in the flesh. Others think perhaps it was epilepsy, or his eyes, or this speech impediment that I've mentioned. Paul would get up and do a lot of stuttering. Others think perhaps it was emotional. That is, that he was isolated from the rest of the fellows, and he never seemed to be a part of the crew at Jerusalem. He never seemed to be one of the in fellows. And I think I could share that. I've been on the outside most of my life, too. Paul never seemed to really make it with the fellows at Jerusalem. He said, I went up to Jerusalem with Peter and those others who seemed to be somewhat, but he said they never added anything to me. And he got called to Jerusalem on another time concerning other matters. And he said, they told us things we were already doing anyhow. And he said, these are the same things we wanted to do anyway. And so he lived pretty much alone, except for Luke the physician and some of the younger. But basically, he never sort of got in with the fellows at Jerusalem, you know, sort of on the outside. Some sort of think that maybe this might have been Paul's thorn in the flesh. Well, I don't really know what Paul's thorn in the flesh is. I think it's good that we don't know. I'm glad it's an unknown thing, because since it is unknown, I think it covers the thing that you have, or that I might have to face in our own lives. I want to talk to you a little bit not only about the gift of the thorn, but the grievance that this thorn brought to Paul. He said, I besought the Lord thrice. And this was over a period of some 14 years. I besought him. It's almost impossible to encompass in the English language the pathos and the agony and the entreaty and the suffering and the intense pain of his inner spirit as he conveys on paper the great turmoil and buffeting and bewildering experience that filled his heart, and it filled his mind, and it filled his soul. because of the gift that God had sent his way. He's grieved because this thing came without any consultation. God never took him into his confidence and said, now, Paul, I'm going to have to send something your way. No, it came without any consultation whatsoever. God didn't take him aside like he did Abraham and said, now, Abraham, I can't hide the thing I'm going to do concerning Sodom and Gomorrah, and I'm going to talk to you about it. But he didn't talk to Paul about this thing. He just said, he just gave it to him. It came unannounced. It was a surprise package. It came on him without any notice. And it continued on and on and on without an answer. It came without any reasons being given. You know, it's not too difficult to stand up under things if somebody will give you a reason for it. Now, you're going to have to go through this. Here's this operation, and you're going to be here, and we're going to do this, and they lay it out. Or you're going to have a tooth pulled. You take a little boy or girl in, and you say, now, honey, we've got to work in your mouth. And Mama stands there, and the doctor stands there, and the dentist, and all the rest, and they reassure the child that this will hurt a little, but it's necessary. But there was no committee. There was no consultation. There was no previous or announced intention whatsoever. God merely sent the package. He woke up, and here it is. No consultation of any kind. And it continued. It continued on. It continued on for at least 14 years, and it continued on beyond 14 years. But there was 14 years before he got an answer. Now, I don't know a lot about the Apostle Paul, but I think he's a lot like you and I. The hardest thing for us to do is to suffer without a reason. To suffer without understanding. To suffer and not have God tell us why. To suffer without having reason. Why, Lord, haven't I been faithful? Why should this thing come to me? Haven't I been a true servant of thine? Why should this thing fall my lot? Why should this come to my family? And friends, our suffering, it may be physical. But, sir, there are sufferings that far surpass the agony of a leg or a limb or a body racked with pain, and that's intellectual suffering. That's emotional suffering. And here it continues. It goes on day after day. And is there anybody here that never's had a why? Is there anybody here that's never had a question? Invariably, John the Baptist suffering in the prison, isolated from the vast multitudes. John the Baptist who had been a miracle child. John the Baptist who had come out of the wilderness roaring like a lion, emptying the cities, with his raven hair flashing in the sun, his eagle-like eyes penetrating the hypocrisy of the scribes and Pharisees, mighty eagle of God, heralding the truth of the everlasting Redeemer, crying out, behold the Lamb of God that taketh away the sin of the world, going down to Jordan's bank and baptizing Jesus Christ, hearing a voice out of heaven, seeing the dove descend. Sir, here's the mighty John the Baptist now incarcerated in the prison. No accompanying noise except the clank of his chain. Not the voice of the multitude praising him for excellent discourses. Not the warm presence of Jesus Christ, his cousin and the Son of God, without the fellowship and the harmony of those whose fellowship he has enjoyed. Now in the blackness of this subterranean prison, 2 to 3 stories below the surface of the earth, beyond the sound of the rumble of the city traffic, beyond the bright sunshine, beyond the singing of the birds and the blooming of the flowers, he walks back and forth. And sir, he's not suffering in his body, but he's suffering in his spirit. He's suffering in his heart. Art thou he that should come, or should we look for another? That's real suffering, sir. That's agonizing suffering. Uncertainty. No light. No shining star. Nothing to show the way. Here's real intense suffering. Have you ever had a why? Why did this come? why do I have to suffer thus? Why would this thing fall on my son? Why should I have a mongoloid child? Why should my darling be born with a clubbed foot or a clubbed hand? Why should my daughter have suffered this thing and gone into this mental depression? Why should I have a son in an institution? Why should my boy have fallen in war? Why should he be returned broken and mangled? Why should these things come? There's no sin in the why. The Apostle Paul had his own why, and he said, I besought the Lord thrice. The first time he came before him, perhaps as a general, he marshaled his troops. He got his men line upon line, and rank upon rank, and phalanx upon phalanx, and regiment upon regiment, and he makes a bold assault upon the throne of God as though he would take the citadel of God by storm. But he's repulsed and falls back with heavy losses. Years pass by, and once again this stake buried deep in him, night and day, conscious of this thorn in the flesh, conscious, agonizing suffering. Whether you may read here in the text if you want, you may consider it may have been persecutions. He turns this thing around. It could be persecutions or distresses or necessities, whatever it is, or weakness. Consider anything you may, sir, but it's a thing that drove him to his knees repeatedly, and on 3 separate occasions it drove him beyond his knees until he came before the throne of God. And the third time he comes, I like to think, as a lawyer. Do you think anybody could have been a better lawyer than the Apostle Paul? Well, let me tell you, sir, if you read the book of Romans and read his closely reasoned and his logical premises and conclusions, you'll know that when he came before the Lord the second time, he came as a lawyer, and he came appealing his case. Oh God, have I not served thee faithfully? Have I not served thee nobly? Have I not been true to the trust? Have I not been a faithful servant of thine? These are the same questions that came in the mind of John the Baptist. These are the same questions that are in the mind of the Apostle Paul. These are the same questions that have crossed the mind of every honest and serious and sober child of God. And Paul comes with his arguments, and his mouth is full of arguments, and the triune God sits in the heavens, and they listen to Paul as he lays out all the logic and all the reason. And when he's laid out his entire brief and presented his case as eloquently only as the apostle could, there still is no answer of any kind. And after it's all finished, after it's all done the second time, he picks up his little portfolio and his little manuscripts and all of his fine arguments, and he disappears without an answer. Oh, my dear friends, it's living that life without an answer to the question that's constantly plaguing you and bugging you and pressuring you that's difficult for so many to take. Isn't that right? The third time he comes like a child before his father. You know, friends, if you want an answer, that's the quickest way to get an answer from God, is to come like a child. There's something in the heart of God. He doesn't have much difficulty saying no to a general. There's something in the disposition of God. He finds it not difficult to turn aside the fellows with their logic and with their reason. But when a fellow comes as a child, when he says, my Father, when he bends the knee and comes as a suppliant at the throne of grace, when he begins to say, Father, lays aside all pretense to reason, and all pretense to power, and all pretense to logic, lays aside all ability, and all learning, and all ideas. 14 years he's been wrestling. 14 years. Oh, how long have you been going? You haven't been going that long. 14 years. At last, even the Apostle Paul learns a lesson. The best way to get the ear of my Father is to come like a child. Father, I am one of yours, and I do not mean to press thee for an answer. If thou dost see fit to keep this mystery a mystery still, if thou dost see fit to keep from my heart and my mind an understanding of this thing, if I could just have a word from thee. You've told me so many other things. I've had such revelations from thee. But oh, that I might just have a word from thee. just a word. Many times you and I have lost spiritual ground because we've crowded God for an answer. When God in His wise providence knew that it was best for us not to have an answer. The mystery of the unknown is a mystery for us all. And if you're here this morning, whether young or old, and never come across the mysterious in your life, you will not have lived long. He was grieved by it. God does send gifts that bring grief to our hearts. God does bring gifts that bring us down to earth. Will not have lived long. He was grieved by it. God does send gifts that bring grief to our hearts. God does bring gifts that bring us down to earth. God does send gifts that drives us to our knees because He would drive us to Himself. You know, friends, you and I are the most valuable possession that God has. There isn't another thing in all the universe that's more valuable than this Dutchman this morning. There are others just as valuable, but there's not another thing that thrills me. When Jesus Christ gave Himself to purchase mankind, He gave Himself to purchase me. I've heard the sacrifice of Jesus Christ exalted, and it shall be, and it should be, the theme of our song, the exaltation of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. But I want you to know something this morning. Jesus Christ is not unwise. Jesus Christ is not impaired in His intelligence, and the price He paid is commensurate with the product that He purchased. If I wasn't as valuable as the price He paid, then I question the wisdom of that same God who is all-wise. But let me tell you, sir, He is all-wise. And in that Dutch, and in that Irish, and in that Scotch, and in that Welshman, and in that German, and in that Italian, and in that Negro, and in that Spaniard, what have you, sir? He finds something that's commensurate with the price that He paid. I'm of value to Him. As a matter of fact, I'm of so much value to God that Satan desires to have me. And you know, one of the things that encourages me is how the devil wants to get a hold of me. I must be worth a lot to Jesus Christ because the devil thinks I'd be worth a lot to him. Satan hath desired to have thee, Peter. There's satanic covetousness. The devil is out to lay his filthy hands and get his hand on anything that belongs to Jesus Christ. And sir, if he isn't making a grab for you, or a bid for you, or a pull for you, he already has you. But as long as he's grabbing, as long as he's bidding, as long as he's reaching out, you have a value to God. You're worth something to God. Glory be to God forever. Satan hath desired to have thee, but I have prayed for thee. Friends, do you know where the most important thing that Jesus Christ has? He shall see the travail of His soul and be satisfied. Your salvation and mine is the most important thing in all the economy of God. It's more important than creating flaming worlds. It's more important than bringing in the millennium. It's more important than organizing. It's more important than all the things we do. And that is the redemption of each individual in the glorious economy of God. And that's yours and mine. That's the biggest thing in the world. You'll see the travail of His soul on that great day when all the redeemed shall stand before His throne. And you know what's going to happen according to Hebrews? He's going to be so thrilled. He's going to be so satisfied. He's going to be so glorified in the saints that the Hebrew writer says He's going to step out on the dais and He's going to sing. He's going to praise. He's going to exalt. The impression is He's going to sing an aria of praise in the presence of the angels and the archangels and God the Father, and the presence of all the assembled host of God. He's going to look and see what his blood has purchased. He's going to behold the product that his blood has brought to full and complete and total fruition. And he's going to be satisfied. More than that, it literally means he's going to be delighted in the product that he has purchased. And he's going to sing our praise before the assembled host of the universe. But friends, before that day, he's got to get us there, and that's why he sends the thorn. That's why he sends the stake to drive us to himself and keep our feet on the ground. Well, this last time he comes, he gets an answer. It's not the answer he wants. Did you ever get an answer from God, but not the answer you wanted? Many times. Oh, many times I've got the answer, but Lord, that's not what I want. That's not the answer I wanted. I can see the triune God sitting before in council, and Paul is before them. He's as a child, teachable, open-hearted, open-minded. The general spirit is gone. The lawyer spirit is gone. The child spirit is present. I see the Father turn to the Son. Shall we illuminate our Son's mind? You were here before us about 14 years ago, as I remember. That was an exalting experience. Oh, yes, yes. But why this? Shall we tell him? And a voice comes from the Master himself. Paul, my son, thou art greatly beloved of the Lord. Thou art a man in whom is an excellent spirit. You have seen things unutterable, things unlawful to utter. You've been a useful instrument. But you can only be useful as you have received this gift from us. It's been a disturbing gift and a distressing gift. It's been a buffeting gift. It's bruised you, but we can't take it away. I'm sorry. We can't take it away. If this kind of a conversation did go on in heaven, I can see the apostle drop his head. He had so desperately wanted this thing taken away. You know, I've heard preachers preach about Paul until you'd think he sort of looked through wings, like maybe you ought to start stroking his feathers. Nice birdie. No, he was a birdie like all the rest of us. He's like the rest of us. You read Paul carefully. We sort of glorify these fellows and splash them with gold and silver and the beautiful colors, but strip all this away. He said, I knew a man. I knew a man. He was just a man. Shall we tell him, Paul, I'm sorry, son, we can't take this thing away. But I tell you what we will do. We'll do what we have, but only we'll give you the reason. We'll give you a little insight into it. Now, Paul, my grace is sufficient for thee. And you have some things going for you, Paul, that you didn't know about. Well, Master, what are they? Paul, the workings of God are mysterious and wonderful. And as wise and as bright as you've been, son, you can't understand all of our ways, for our ways are past finding out. So you might as well quit trying to find this thing out and run this thing down. Our ways are past finding out. But Paul, our grace, my grace, is sufficient. Now, Paul, the things you have going for you are your weaknesses. Our strength. Now, we're going to let you know a little bit, give you just a little insight into the way we run things up here. Our strength is made perfect in your weakness. And, Paul, you've got a lot of that, haven't you? Oh, yes, I have. Our strength is made perfect in your weakness. Now, as long as you keep trying and wrestling and playing general and lawyer, you do a lot of it on your own, son. But if you'll just sort of relax,
Well, Paul said, I see it. I see. I begin to understand. Why, Master, I have lots of weakness. And infirmities, I'm loaded with them. Well, I've got all kinds of infirmity. Why, he said, I'd gladly, glory, if I could get more grace. He said, now, I understand I can't get rid of this thing, but if there's going to be another compensation here, I want it. I want thy grace. Thy grace is made perfect in weakness. Here's grace to exchange. The grace of Jesus Christ, the grace that has been promised, Paul. Grace is a person. He's full of grace and truth. Grace is a person. Grace is Jesus Christ. And he said, Paul, you'll get a lot. You'll have all there is of me. All of my resources are at your disposal when you start pleading weakness, when you start pleading infirmity, when you start pleading insufficiency, when you start telling us how little you are, then right away our resources are available to you. All of our power is available to you. When you can't stand up to the devil, we'll be right there to stand behind you. You stand, and we stand behind you. My dear friends, I could go out here on Route 1 and hold up my hand and they'd run over me. Volkswagens and Beetles would chase me off from the boulevard. But if I put on a uniform of the highway patrolman of the state of Florida and walk out there and put my hand up, those Beetles and Mack trucks and tankers and hot rodders from Hope Sound, they'd all come to a stop. Not because they couldn't run over me, but because back of me was all the authority of the state of Florida. And while they might run me off of the road, or some dumbbell might run over me, there'd be some cop that would be sure to catch up with them. Somewhere the law would take care of them. And here, my dear friend, Paul is learning the lesson that though he is weak in Jesus Christ, he is strong. When I stand, sir, I'm not standing in my own. I can't stop the devil. I may stand in the way, but I can only take my stand against hell and the powers of hell as Jesus Christ stands behind me in the sufficiency of His might and His glory and His power and His grace and His ability. In my weakness, then am I strong. Here's grace. Here's grace to exchange weakness for strength. Did you ever have a blood transfusion? Did you ever go to tired blood? You couldn't walk very well. You were slow. When I was in the hospital there, I was afraid they'd give me a transfusion and dump some Southerner's blood in my vein, and I'd go around like some Southerners I know. So I was scared to death that sort of thing would take place, you know, but I think they must have given me some of Barefoot's blood or somebody from the Arctic there, because I feel pretty good about it. But did you ever feel going all fagged out and tired blood, couldn't turn disease, and didn't have any energy, didn't have any strength, and you get a blood transfusion? Man, how you feel warm all over. Your brain cells begin to work. Your hands begin to work. You don't want to come right up out of there. The whole person changes. The tired blood has been taken out, and the new blood. Here's exactly what the apostle is talking about. You get rid of your tiredness. You transfer your weaknesses. You lay these weaknesses and receive a divine blood transfusion from Jesus Christ, and suddenly you're strong in the power of His might. You're able to overcome. You're an overcomer by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of His testimony. You're strong in the Lord. And God, you are strong and do exploits. You're exchanging your weakness for His divine strength. Friends, let's acknowledge we're not sufficient for this day or for this time, but in Him whom we live and whom we serve, He's sufficient for it all. He's big enough for the whole job. Glory be to God. Here's grace to endure without understanding. Grace to endure. Grace to keep on keeping on when you don't understand. Hallelujah. Lord, why won't you heal me of this thing? I've been faithful. We paid our... Why don't you heal me? This outfit running around the country declaring that God heals everybody ought to have their head healed. That's right. I say it again, in case you didn't understand me. The people who declare that God heals everybody ought to have their head healed. Amen. Well, I appreciate you shouting me down, but it's true nevertheless. Grace to endure without understanding. Someone said to Wellington, Wellington, how is it that your soldiers and that we British soldiers are more brave than all the soldiers of the world? He said, my friend, you're mistaken. The British soldiers are not more courageous and they're not more brave than other soldiers. Well, he said, then how come for the great victory at Waterloo? And others said, our men are brave 5 minutes longer. That's the point. Not how loud we shout. I've heard a lot of these carols shout loud and make a big racket and roar up the highway of life in their high-powered vehicles, you know, and blowing their horn and scattering the people and the chickens and the cows and the horses and everything we gets off on the road. Go weaving up the curves and around the hills and wind up over there in the valley somewhere. But they speed around like that. They go slow. They're low, and double creeper, but they just keep right on going along. I don't know why God made you the way He did or me the way He did, but it seems like all my life I've been passed up. Somebody blows the horn and away they go. They're just going around. I seem like I just go low, double creeper. They sort of go chugging along and chugging along and chugging along and chugging along. So I know where I'm still on the same road I started on. I'm a little bit closer home than I was a few years ago, and I'm on the same highway. It's the highway of holiness, and a lot of those hot rod artists that have been skimming around and slipping around and passing on the double line and going around the curves, they've gone over the hill a long time ago. Paul, we have grace for you to endure, to stay by the grueling job. Some folks are maybe set up like racers, but other folks are sort of geared up like the trucking industry, you know. They have an infinite variety of degree of gears, and when they come to a long hill, they hook her down there, and they just sort of grind along and chug along, and it's amazing how you travel across the country and you pass these fellows that isn't long before they're passing you, and then they come to a long grade and they slow down, but don't think they're going to stop, buddy. They may get down to 5 miles an hour. They've got a load they're carrying, but you let them get up on the level there. They'll grind those old boxes, and won't be long they'll be tailgating you, and you may cruise a good many of them right along at 70, and they've got her in some kind of a box somewhere, and they've got a real powerhouse, and they'll roar across the countryside. Grace to stay by. Paul, our grace there's grace to endure, grace to stay by the thing. Do you have staying power, sir? Or do you fold when things come your way, when you suffer? There are people here this morning that have physical problems. There are people here this morning that have family problems that have sapped your energy. There are folks here that feel like, I could blow my brains out, or I could take an overdose of pills. That's not the solution at all. There's a sufficiency of grace in Jesus Christ. There's grace for every day. There's grace for every mile of the way. Turn over here to Hebrews chapter 11. I was reading it this morning. And he goes down through here. Brother, we hit the wide open spaces here when they quenched the violence of fire and escaped the edge of the sword. And out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in the fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Oh, you saw the crowd brandishing their sword this morning, and we were all ready to take a march and turn the world upside down. But he said, of others, they had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings and imprisonments and bonds, and they were stoned, and they were sawn asunder, and they were tempted, and they wandered about in goat skins and camel skins, and they were destitute, and they were afflicted, and they were tormented, and they were hunted in the dens and the caves of the earth. These all, having obtained a good report through faith, receive not the promise, or receive not deliverance. You know, friends, the fellows whose names aren't found in this chapter are just as innumerable as the fellows who did. You realize that those others who didn't receive deliverance, who suffered on, and who died on and died in the faith, they didn't get delivered, but they died triumphant in Jesus Christ. They died having received the promise of sufficiency of grace. Jesus Christ hasn't promised us an easy way, or skies always blue, or skies always blue, and roads always clear, and super four-lane highway. Jesus Christ has never promised His disciples that He'd handcuff the devil so we could sort of skip to the loo through the world with its heartaches and its sorrow, but He's promised us grace in the middle of our adversity. He has promised us strength in the middle of our weakness. If we'd plead weakness, He'd give strength. If we'd plead ignorance, He'd give wisdom. If we'd plead poverty, He would give wealth. Christ is our sufficiency. He is our all. You don't need Christ and something else. You and I need Jesus Christ and nothing else whatsoever. He is the sufficiency for our day. He was rich, but He became poor, that we through His poverty might be made rich. Glory be to God. Sir, if you're here today and you're perplexed or you're bewildered or you're confused, and you haven't got an answer to your prayer that you've been pleading for a long time, you may get this answer, sir. It may not satisfy you completely. It may not be the complete removal of your thorn, but there's grace for every day. There's grace for every hill. There's grace for every curve. There's grace for every thorn. There's help for every problem. It's found in the person of Jesus Christ, glorious Redeemer. Paul says, I'm perplexed and I'm confused and I'm cast down, but I'm yet sanctified. For the Schmul, you mean folks can be balled up and be sanctified? Yes. Cast down? Yes. Perplexed? Yes. Do you think the Hebrew children understood the fiery trial of the furnace? Do you think Joseph understood all the ins and outs of his prison experience? No, I don't think so. Do you think Daniel understood the lion's den? No. Do you think Jesus understood all? My God, why? That why on the lips of the immutable Savior lends a comfort to every soul going through a time of trouble and deep distress. I just like to mention a couple of things in closing. It's the grace of Jesus Christ that qualifies us for the royal order of the Thorn. Jesus Christ qualifies for the royal order of the Thorn. When I was in England a few years ago, I was taken in, and perhaps you were there, brother and sister French, years ago, what they call the Royal Order of the Thistle. Winston Churchill, near the end of his days, was elevated to a member of the Royal Order of the Thistle. It's an eminent honor reserved for outstanding accomplishments among men in the English or the British Empire. And I got to thinking about this, and I got to think about the Royal Order of the Thorn. You and I are so prone to whimper and to whine and to wring our hands and to cry about the thorns in our life and the hard. There is a Royal Order of the Thorn, but Jesus Christ is the head of it. And the Royal Order of the Thorn. None of us covet to get in there, but He places us there. It's an honor to be with Him wherever He is. And since He's the file leader of the Royal Order of the Thorn, if He drives a stake deep into my side, it's only to drive me to Himself. It's only to put me in that order that He so nobly and gloriously led, for they had a crown of thorns upon His brow. The Royal Order. I met a woman some time back. She has been in this condition now for over 20 years. Probably closer to 30 years now, if she's still alive. I went to her little nursing home out in the far west. They said, now, we want you to meet Sister, and they gave me her name. She's one of our prayer warriors. She helps us. And she's been asking if you wouldn't come to see her, Brother Schmul, and I was happy to do it. I stood by her bedside, crippled with arthritis and many, many physical complications. She was radiant. She didn't preach. She said, Brother Schmul, I've heard so much about you, I just felt like I wanted to meet you. And I felt so humbled by it. So unworthy. I said, well, would you tell me your story? She said, yes. She said, Brother Schmul, she said, years ago I stayed and took care of my father and my mother. I had a chance at romance and I passed it up because I took care of my parents. And she said, then after they were gone, she said, my chances seemed to be gone. And then I was struck with this. And she said, of course, you see me as I am. She said, I was here on this bed, wondering, somewhat bitter, soured over the things that had happened, wondering why, that I began to seek the face of the Lord in earnest for an understanding. And she said, He came and so sweetened my heart and my life. But I still was doing nothing. She said, I came down to the door and the gate of death. And she said, in that hour, she said, I looked and I was borne by angel wings near the gate of heaven, just on the other side, on this side of the river. And she said, He put out His hand to me and He bid me to come. She said, as I stood at the river's brink wondering whether I should come or not, He said to me, daughter, you may come if you wish. But really, I have a work that you can do for me if you'll stay on the other side of the river. Now you may come, daughter. And she said, I saw Mama and I saw Daddy. And I saw the Master. And Lord, what can I do? Here she is, stretched on a bed, 24 hours a day, had been for several years, and now over 20. I have a work for you. If you go back, I'll make it clear what I would have you do. She went back. She's still there today as far as I know. She writes over 100 letters to missionaries around the world every month. She prays hours on end. I'm on that list. She's entered the Royal Order of the Thorn. She'd like to depart. She'd like to be released at times, but she said, I hear His voice saying, my grace, my dear, my grace, my dear, is sufficient for thee. For in thy weakness my strength. And you know, His strength is made perfect in her. But I walked out there that day, walking taller, walking straighter, and thinking how fortunate I am, how little I've suffered, how little I've endured. I say, oh God, don't let me be a whimperer. Don't let me be a hand-wringer. Don't let me fuss about. My Lord, help me to draw. Lord, I've got so much. I've got so many weaknesses. Lord, have you considered my weaknesses lately? Did you notice the pile of... I have, my son. Well, Lord, here they are. And I can testify personally on first-hand information that His grace is made perfect in weakness. 2 years ago, I was on my cot one day. I had just come home from the hospital. I thought it was all over. My wife came in and she said, well, we've got, I don't know, I think it was the convention, a letter. It was a letter from Brother French. She said, Brother French has written and says that he's counting on you preaching at Hope Sound this year. I said, oh, can't be. She said, well, here it is. Here was a letter, a short one, in Brother French's difficult hand. And I said, oh, dear. I said, do you think it could be? I said, if he thinks I'll be up, I'm going to believe God that I will be up. I'm going to trust. What do you have to recommend you, Harold? Weakness. Oh, I have carloads of it. Infirmities, lots of them. These are my assets. These are the things I trade in the bank of heaven with, Brother French. For weakness. I come and say, Lord, I'm a child and I'm weak. I've got a lot of it. You said you'd use it. And I also have a whole lot of infirmities, Lord, and I'm confessing my infirmities. You know them, and I lay them out there. He said, that's an impressive pile, son. I'll give you what you need for today. As thy day, so shall thy strength be. My grace is sufficient for thee. I don't know who will join the Royal Order of the Thorn this coming year. It would be easier for you to die than to join this Royal Order. It'll be better for the world that you join the order than die. I don't know what Paul saw. I really don't care. Theologians and scholars have specialized and written a lot about what he saw. You know, the important thing to me is that he got grace. The important thing to me is that he had this experience. You know, I almost question the value of a lot of visions and revelations, but I've never questioned the value of this down-to-earth message, my grace. This truth has done us more good than all of his visions. Who in the world knows what his visions were? Who in the world knows what he saw? Nobody knows, but we know this, that after 14 years later, he came around to get something that's helped the church for the last 20 centuries. Say, friends, your suffering is of more value to God's kingdom than all your revelations and all your special illuminations and all your visions and all your flapping around. If you manifest the grace of God in the trying, testing, twisting circumstances of life. My grace is sufficient for thee. Well, Job and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Madame Guyon, and Moses, who was slow of speech, and Harelip Archer, and all the rest of that grand crowd have proven his grace. And my dear friend, before next camp meeting rolls around, if it does, you and I will prove once again his grace. I don't know what you're going back to. I don't know what I'm going back to. But I know what I'm going on with, the grace of God. Shall we stand? The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ has been demonstrated in the lives of his children. And we thank thee today that we have plenty of qualifications of weakness and infirmities. We thank thee that thou hast given us an answer, not the one we've always wanted, but you've given us an answer to every day. You've given us an answer to face up to the bald, hard facts of life. Now as we leave here this morning, we pray thou wilt help us to go not in any sufficiency of our own, but the sufficiency of Jesus Christ. Thy grace is sufficient. If thou dost send an ugly gift this year, may we receive it as from the wisdom of God and the wise counsel of God and the good purpose of God. In Jesus' name, amen. Shake hands and be friendly. Don't be worldly.